The President's executive order on oil and gas revenue remittance has triggered significant public debate, with unions, lawmakers and industry actors weighing in. The latest is coming from Director General, Budget Office of the Federation, Tanimu Yakubu, who clarified that the Executive Order 9 was consistent with the 1999 Constitution and does not amount to an overreach of executive authority. Yakubu says the Executive Order 9 does not create law, but enforces constitutional custody of Federation revenues. Now, given the national importance of the Federation account and the implications for fiscal stability, it is critical that viewers hear perspectives beyond the immediate sector response, as the public deserves a clear understanding of what this means, not only for institutions, but for budgets, infrastructure delivery, and economic stability across the country. Joining us on the show to give his perspective on how revenue structure affects state allocations, capital budget, debt servicing, and frontline public services is Akintunde Oyebode, Chairman of the Forum of State Commissioners of Finance. Good morning, Mr. Oyebode, and thanks for joining us this morning on The Morning Show.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Akintunde, thank you for joining us. Well, I assume as the chairman of
thank you, Doc.
Commissioners of Finance across the state, you must be happy because now that NNPC and MDGIF will lose profit oil, royalty oil, profit gas, tax oil, all of that now going straight into the Federation account under Section 162, distributable pool. It means you commissioners of finance will get more money. But there have been many perspectives on the issue. NNPC losing 30% of management revenue deduction, losing another 30% in terms of what it gets from oil contracts, will have issues. Now, Pengasan says that's not good enough because NNPC, NUPRC, and the others not covered by a capital budget will not even be able to survive. Government says, well, we have acted strictly under the law. Some analysts have said, in fact, PIA 2021, has issues that will have to be reviewed and addressed. And now this new regime has, kicked into effect. Where do you stand? I assume that you speak not only for yourself, but also for other commissioners of finance.
Thank you, Dr. Abati, and good morning. I think it's not about states getting more revenue. It's about adherence to the Constitution. It's about doing what is proper. We won't be commissioners of finance forever, but the tone we set following the Constitution is priority here. I mean, in monetary terms, this is not even a significant increase to the Federation account. In total, from the management fee and frontier exploration fee and the gas flaring penalties, we estimate approximately 1.5 trillion will be added to the Federation account. Now, if you assume that's an account that gets upwards of 30 trillion per annum, right? You can do the math. It's a single-digit impact in terms of growth on the Federation account. But that's not the point. I think the crux of the matter is we have to fix issues with the PIA. If you think about what this EO9 is talking about, it's only talking about PSCs. It's not even talking about the joint venture contracts, which are governed by a joint operating agreement. If you look at the impact of PIA on JVs, which we are not talking about today, pre-PIA, JVs contributed circa $12 billion to the Federation. Post-PIA, that number has come down to about $2 billion. So you do the math. That's an area that no one is even talking about. The transfer of the JV assets without proper valuation, without proper governance. We're talking about just management fee and frontier exploration fees from PSCs, which contribute circa 1.5 trillion. Now, NNPC if we go by its audited financial statements, made a profit of 4.5 trillion in 2024, right? So if you look at the revenues of the corporation, what we're talking about here is a small amount. So it's not about the amount. It's about the principle. It's about the philosophy. It's about the adherence to the Constitution. It's about safeguarding federation revenues. And I think that should be the focus. But also importantly is that it's about the evolution of NNPCL as a limited liability company. And I think that this is part of its evolution. So it's not an us against them debate as it's being shaped. It's really about improving the efficiency of our oil corporation, but also safeguarding federation revenues.
All right, thank you so much. I referred to Mr. Yakubu's statement in my introductory, in my intro, and one of the things he said was that it wasn't an overreach. This EO9 was just, implementing provisions of the Constitution 1999. But can you really say, Mr. Oyebode, that this isn't an executive overreach? And there have been concerns raised around signals to even investors that if the executive can unilaterally, using an executive order, change the mode of, revenue source of the NNPCL, can creditors lend to the NNPCL? What if something changes in the future again using an executive order? I believe that's some of the concerns raised by industry players. What's your take on that?
So first, I think if you want a legal opinion, there are other Oyebodes who you bring on your station who can provide a legal opinion. I'm not a lawyer, I'm an economist, but I think that at the heart of the matter is if there's any legal concerns, the best thing to do is for the relevant parties to approach the courts for an interpretation. But in terms of investor confidence, remember there's an implementation committee. So if, and it's a big if, this tiny share of NNPC's revenues, again, I'm talking about 1.5 trillion in a company that declared revenues of 45 trillion, right, and profits of circa 4 trillion, or 4.5 trillion if I'm not mistaken. If that is an issue for their lenders, creditors, the implementation committee will ensure that if there are valid agreements, contracts, in place, that it will not affect the repayment of those contracts. I imagine that the implementation committee will do that, and we should wait for their guidelines, before coming to a conclusion. But as it affects the overall investment climate, I don't think that there's any real effect. I mean, I think that the oil and gas industry, can I finish, please?
Yes, of course.
The oil and gas industry in this country has seen significant upsides in the last 2 years. We're talking $10 billion of new investments. We're talking Bonga North that's gone through FID, Ubeta, etc. Bonga Southwest is coming on board. I think it's a great time for the industry as a whole. The presidential directives, some of which have been codified as part of the National Tax Act, have been significant. Directives shortening contracting periods, etc., have been significant. And of course, the overall macro environment where there's now a lot more foreign exchange liquidity and some offshoots of growth and stability all improve the investor environment. So I don't see any negative impacts to the investment climate. And as I said earlier, when the implementation committee is done with its work and sets the guidelines, you will see that any contracts or any agreements, obligations will be handled. But I also must note that we need to act correctly as a country, right? A situation where an entity pledges assets that doesn't belong to it, right, is also something that we can't afford to continue into perpetuity.
All right, I understand you, but I just wanted to make a clarification. The question I asked you doesn't require legal knowledge. Besides, you also talk about contracts in your response. But very importantly, it's not the amount of money. What I was asking you about was the principle of an executive decision, not whether or not it was $1 or $2. It was a principle I was asking you about.
My principle is on the Constitution. The Constitution is superior to any law, any act of parliament. This is upholding the Constitution.
Okay, I mean, I get you, and I knew that was the place we're going to run to. But speaking about the legal counsel, how is Daddy doing? I mean, I was just talking to Dr. Bati. I said we're not seeing him in public in a while. Hope he's great. He's doing well?
He's very well. Thank you for asking.
Very good. Good. So, yes, on this, I have pumped the air and said kudos to President Tinubu on this. And because, yes, it will bring back that adjustment to a lot of the things NNPC had done back in the days and the influence on the PIA itself. I mean, we all know how that process went and the role NNPC played for all of these perks them to come to them in the PIA. So on this, yes, President Tinubu, good kudos to you. But my grouse is when the money now gets to the states, what do the states do with it? You guys are indebted to the tune of about 4 trillion. They're already giving you guys a lot of money. Is it that the money is not enough? Your debt is still there, and we are not seeing the impacts of what you're doing with the money. That's where I feel there's a disconnect. What's happening? Government keeps saying they're giving you guys so much.
Good question. So I always like to correct the description of giving because it sounds like a charitable act. You know, these are revenues that belong to the federation, right? And that should be distributed as prescribed by law. So no one is giving anybody anything. The federal government, states and local governments all share in a distributable pool, you know, as enshrined in the Constitution. I think it's important to note over the last 2 years that subnational debt, domestic debt, has come down significantly across most, if not all, states. Many states have seen at least 15 to 20% reduction in domestic debt. So it means that from a fiscal perspective, states are obviously healthier than they were many years ago. Even on the foreign debt, where, you know, foreign debt numbers shot up, it wasn't necessarily because of additional borrowing, but we all know the impact of the exchange rate on debt service when it comes to foreign debt. But as the exchange rate starts to moderate, we will also see that the naira value of those obligations will start to come down and the repayments from states will also start to come down. I think ultimately, and we can have a conversation here about accountability, you know, and it's a good conversation to have. Now, in my state, for example, starting from the budget process, it's very consultative. Up to the minutes of the budget consultation sessions, they're available on the state website. Our budgets are published online. Procurement records are published online. Budget reports, quarterly implementation reports are published online. Audited financial statements are published online. And if you think about the aftermath of the World Bank supported SIFTAS program, you know, many states are showing a lot more transparency and accountability when it comes to public finance. And it's now for, you know, analysts, you know, the media, civil society, etc., who are also now doing a great job stepping up to the plate to analyze these records and hold us to account. But the first part of it is, right, and protecting federation revenues is the beginning. Because if you don't do that, there's even nothing to analyze, right? There's nothing to be transparent about. So the first part is done. Nation building is an unending exercise, and we continue to refine this process and get better at it. But I take your...
But Aki, the grouse with you guys in the States is the fact that when we look at your budgets across the states, it's very shambolic. We are hearing that they are buying cars for people. In fact, the other one in Lagos the other day, we are talking about buying homes for House of Assembly members in Lagos and Abuja. I mean, is this what you guys are doing with more money? Because yes, you are advocating for the other side, for the JV and all of that, the joint ventures money to also come in, you know, which, I want more money in the Federation purse. But when the money is now passed on to you guys, where we are seeing people buying cars, people buying houses for lawmakers and the likes. I mean, it shuts us out, you know?
So, Rufai, I think, again, I don't hold brief for another state's budget apart from mine. But I'll tell you one thing. You have to ask yourself, is there an improvement between a private corporation, right, whose budget, whose costs you don't see, who's not accountable to you? When these revenues go into the public purse, there is accountability. We're talking about it now. That's the first start. That's the start. We're talking about it. Now, if you think about what has happened with revs in the past, well, that's a good point to note. But what is important is that there's a process, right? There are budget sessions that happen, right? You sit down at those sessions, you question the budgets. Now, even us as a state, we're constantly refining how do we budget better. In Ekiti, where I live and work. Okay. Right? Let me
give you an instance.
No, can I land? Can I land for 1 minute?
Okay. After
give me an instance.
Yeah. Let me give you an instance quickly, because Ekiti was trending recently. There was a reported allocation of only 68 million specifically for healthcare project, capital project in the state with a population of 3 to 3.5 million.
Thank you very much for that question.
I mean, answer that. Answer all the people as
Thank you very much.
Question. Yeah.
So I think that point was very ignorant. Again, if you look at across our budgets, right, we budgeted north of $3 billion for healthcare as a whole. What that budget line spoke about was a budget line for primary healthcare administration. Now, PHC budgets sit within the local government. Just last year, Rufai, we renovated 9 general hospitals. We're constructing a ward at the Ekiti State University Teaching Hospital. We renovated 125 primary healthcare centers, right? We've built cold chain storage facilities for the healthcare industry. Can all of that be done with 62 million naira? It's impossible. If you look at our budget, and I'll invite you, and I'm happy to come back if you have my time to speak about Ekiti State's finances. If you look at our budget and you actually leave the headlines, leave the banter on social media and focus on the budget, you see that those numbers are even ridiculous. We can't even spend your airtime discussing something. I've given you an example of how those numbers they don't even sound realistic.
Okay. I would like you to share your thoughts with us on one of the subjects we discussed this morning, which is about what the DMO is saying about subnational debts. The DMO says there's been an increase between maybe June and September 2025 of about 0.98% in subnational debt, moving from, I think about 3.96 trillion to 4 trillion, and it's still rising. The problem is that these states borrow money, which is not supposed to be more than 50% of their revenue in the previous year. They borrow more than that. 2, borrowed money is supposed to be spent on capital projects. Most of these states spend on recurrent expenditure, conspicuous consumption. And so here we have a problem, because if you borrow, whether from the World Bank or from the ADB or from Afrism, you have to pay back. What do you say to that? I'm not saying you domesticate it, but as a general principle, all these states owing and the governors are just living large. And the people are saying, we can't even see the evidence of all these borrowings in real terms.
So Dr. Abati, I think, again, there's a misconception here. Before you take a loan, right, there's a borrowing plan, right? And that borrowing plan itemizes what the loan is going to be used for. I struggle to see any state that's really borrowing to fund its recurrent expenditure. A lot of the multilateral lending that you see are for things like providing water, are for things like providing support to the agricultural sector, protecting the environment. These are programs like SOWASH, NewMap, etc. These are clear programs. They are environmental protection programs. They are programs that provide potable water to citizens of the states. In our case, for example, some of the lending that we've taken is to build an innovation, a knowledge zone, which again is a commercially viable project. Now, what we can say is, and there's a good debate to have to say, should our borrowing be targeted at projects that are commercially viable, that can repay itself, or should we also spend part of that on social infrastructure? And that's a classic argument that we will never finish having, right? Because some of these projects like education, primary education, basic healthcare are things that might not necessarily repay themselves, but improve the quality of lives of the people. Now, overall on borrowing, if you look between 2023 and 2026, please let me finish answering the question.
But please briefly, because we're out of time.
Between 2023 and 2026, I know, but let me answer the question. You're interrupting me. Between 2023 and 2026, subnational domestic borrowing has gone down significantly. And I explained to you earlier, where the spike came was in multilateral borrowing, and that is starting to moderate as the exchange rates has started to moderate as well.
All right, Akintunde Oyebode, thank you so much for your time with us today.